FilmStruggles is an experience-based podcast where we ask all the questions an early filmmaker would make.
With a new guest every week, from experts to people that are starting just like us.
We cover different topics like motivation, work balance, networking, and so much more.
We discuss what to do, what not to do, and how to turn struggles into action.
I am Claudia.
And I am Gabriel. Welcome to FilmStruggles. Groups, communities, and tribes. Finding your people and your unique voice can be very challenging. Representation matters, and in 2020, we've seen how much the world needs new points of view, new stories, and new perspectives. On this week's episode of FilmStruggles, we're talking about representation, celebrating your heritage, empowering your community, and finding your own artistic language.
Our special guest for this week is Barbara Lee, an independent filmmaker, writer, founder, and president of Vancouver Asian Film Festival with a career devoted to increase representation in front and behind the camera in film and TV media. Since 1997, Barbara and Bab have been uplifting and empowering new and emerging voices in the film community, and she agreed to sit down with us and share a little bit of her experience over the years.
My name is Barbara Lee. I am the founder and president of the Vancouver Asian Film Festival. And when I started the festival, I had produced a short, and I was looking for places to screen it at, and a friend of mine took me to the Seattle International Asian American Film Festival, and I saw a CBC film there, which was Runaway. It was the opening film. It starred Sandra Oh, and it was a CBC. It was a Canadian film, and I thought, oh my gosh, we've got to have something in Vancouver. I'll look it up, and I can show my film there. And then I came back, and there was no such film festival. So then I thought, okay, we better start one. And I didn't realize how much work it was, and so that's what we've done. I spent 25 years supporting filmmakers, building Asian Canadian film community in Vancouver, showcasing their films, offering opportunities, and teaching educational panels. And I also have been a news reporter for the CBC. I've done films, documentaries, filmmaker, producer, writer. So lots of stuff.
Wow. That's quite
really,
a career.
really interesting and nice stuff. It's very nice that you started speaking about your experience with VEF, because it was actually one of our first questions, because we wanted to hear more a little bit. How was the process of starting the festival and creating this movement back in the 90s? And I'm really curious to know, like, how was the reception of the community once you had this idea and you started to put this into action?
Well, it took a long time, from the idea that it was 1995 to our first film festival was 1997. So I self-funded. I flew out to San Francisco. I flew out to New York because they had an Asian film festival circuit in the US. And I did a lot of research on my own. 1997 was the year of Asia Pacific, yet there was no funding for our festival to start. They were looking at Asia as opposed to homegrown Canadians who were of Asian descent. So we're always not seen as, we were not valued. And we still, up to this point in time, I feel like we're not valued as real contributing part of the Canadian society. And that's really a shame.
Mm-hmm. Like not Asian enough.
We're not Canadian enough, and we're not Asian enough. I would say VAF, Vancouver Asian Film Festival, they have a multi-pronged approach. But our main objective is to increase representation. Mm-hmm. And what increased representation means is that we are seen and heard in mainstream media and film and television. And the reason that the implications of that also is that it is the media and representation is the most effective way to combat racism. Mm-hmm. Because if you're not seen and heard and not shown as to be part of the greater society, then we are always seen as foreigners. We're othered. We are seen, we're erased, that means that we are not even part of this country. Mm-hmm. If we're not being shown. And then when we are being shown, is it a negative stereotype that reinforces, images that aren't really true to who we are as communities, as real people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and you see it in every community, right? The way that we are portrayed in movies and that is like, that's not, and then you can tell because that's your community that you're watching up there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Now, if there was 20 representations, and there were some negative, some positive, and there was a whole spectrum, then that would be fine. But if all the representation is of a negative stereotype, well, people who aren't familiar or don't have a lot of contact with certain racialized groups, that's all they see. And that's what they start believing, that this group of people are like that, because that's all they know and seen.
Yeah.
Just speaking of like this, the stereotypical representation of different minorities and communities, does this play a really big part in the VEF process of selecting films and creating the catalog of films to be played?
In terms of the programming, I haven't sat on programming, but we really look at the quality of the story, the storytelling. It's more important than production, because we understand not everybody has the same level playing field in terms of how they can, the production levels. But really the story, the voice, those are probably the most important. And then production, and I always say to filmmakers, editing is your most important thing you need to do, because how well something's edited will really give power to your story. But I would say that plays into it, because what we want to do, part of why there's all these different festivals that you talk about, is that in order to break through the film industry and to be represented, you have to be so much better than everybody else to even get through. So we wanted everyone to have an opportunity to train and have those showcases. So you're not going to improve just reading about it, just going to school. Like you said, you have to do it. You have to be on set. You have to watch other people do it. You have to be a part of it. That's the only way you're going to hone your craft. And so that is what VAF does, is gives them an opportunity to showcase. They get to see other people's work. They get to compare theirs to it, and they get to learn from each other. And we also launch MAM, which is a Mighty Asian Movie Making Marathon that's happening right now. And that's another opportunity for people to come and make either the first film or join a group of like-minded filmmakers and really learn the process. And a lot of times, some of these MAM films have gone on to be the calling cards for the filmmakers, their first full film. And then every time you write a grant or anything, they want you to have at least one film behind your back. Under your belt. And this was our way of saying, okay, we're going to help you. You know, we're going to, and it's funny because I'm Asian and coming from an immigrant background, we always are like, our families push us to be doctors, lawyers, accountants, engineers, and there's a pathway to get there. But in the arts, there's really no pathway. And so one of the things that VAF does is we're giving them a pathway. We're saying, you need to have your first film. Come to MAM and make your first film. You need to go out to festivals. Here we are, we're a festival. We're joined with all these other festivals. We're helping them, give them a pathway into the arts as a career.
Especially because you don't only have the competition, like the MAM competition where you pitch and everything, but you also have the mentorship sessions, right? Just to guarantee that all those filmmakers are actually getting the proper education and preparing everything so they can do and either make mistakes or succeed beautifully and then have something to show after, right?
Last year, I participated in one of the MAM competitions, and especially because I was kind of super recent out of film school. When the team approached to me like, do you want to participate in MAM? And I was like, what is it? Like, I have no idea what was it. And they're, it's this Asian film competition. I'm like, but I'm not Asian. Like, why would I felt that I was taking the spot away from an Asian filmmaker, and I was like, I won't, like, I didn't say I won't do it, but then I started researching, and the director was Mexican. I was like, okay, if he's Mexican, I'm Mexican. Okay, let's do it. And then I realized when I went into the event that it was beautiful, and it was full of people and a lot of new faces that I got to meet. I realized that it was people from like everything. Like, it was not only Asian people. I was very shocked of that, like, in a good way.
Yeah. So that's part of our mandate, is we are an inclusive film festival. So the criteria is that at least one of the key creatives is of Asian heritage, self-identified. But we really are not trying to take each other's spot. We're trying to build a bigger table, and we want to make sure that everybody has a seat at the table. Everybody who's never had a seat at the table, we want everybody to have a seat at the table. And so we say the only way we can do it is that as we pull ourselves up, we have to pull other people up. And that's kind of a basis of the way we approach things. So yes, we say, come join us, come be a part of it. We're all gonna, with a collective voice and a collective movement of action orientated projects, we can move this movement forward. And as long as we're not fighting over, like, we don't want to be fighting over resources. We want to be everyone sharing resources, everyone bringing what they bring and building something bigger and better.
And I really like what you just said, that you're kind of not competing against each other. You're helping and bringing people up with you. But at the same time, it's a very competitive field because there is a lot of ideas and everyone wants to say their own. So what would you say would be like a good advice for people to compete, but at the same time bring people together with you? I don't know. It's kind of like complex situation there.
Yeah, you know what I would say? I would say you're competing because you should use other people to motivate you, because you're not going to get better unless you're all pushing each other to do better and you're doing your best work. Because if you're kind of all just not the best is going to come out of it. So that competition is often there to motivate and to inspire and to get you to that next level. So you really, I believe personally that you really need that, because excellent work will beget excellent work. It's just the way it's going to happen. And I also think that, you know what? You might learn that maybe writing is not your thing. Maybe you have more of an eye for visual or sets or something like that. So you shouldn't think of like, oh, so-and-so so much better. They're so great at that. What can I do that's special and unique to me that I can add to that project? So it's also finding your place in it, because not everyone's a director. Not everyone's, a writer. But we all have something to contribute to move a project forward. And what is that for you is something that only going through the process will you learn what it is. So it's really a lot of self-discovery, a lot of trial and error. And if you don't have opportunities, if you only have one opportunity, think about the pressure that is. Like somebody, you get this one job and that's it, and that's all you're going to have. And everybody who looks like you is going to be judged on that one, opportunity. That's pretty, that's a lot of pressure, and people don't perform the best in that. So if you have a lot of like-minded people all working together, all striving to do their best work, then that's positive competition, I would say. And then I've always said that having that one shining great filmmaker from a certain ethnic group doesn't help everybody. We need 20 of them. So we need to have a whole group of people being trained and excelling. And if we can all each help each other do that, then we're all going to benefit from it.
I love that. I love what you're saying, because especially when you're starting, you feel like you need to do everything and that you need to stand out right away. I don't know. That's the feeling that you put all that pressure, and this is a very common thing that we have been discussing in every episode of the podcast. That is how common is it that when you're starting, you put more pressure on yourself than there actually is, and you perform better when you, like you said, you help each other to succeed collectively.
Yeah, I think filmmaking is really a collective process. Sure, you'll have the one-offs, people who do everything, but I always find the best work is collectively coming together, collaborating. And I would say that when you're first coming out, find your tribe. And I always talk about finding your tribe, finding the people that complement you. They don't have to be exactly like you. And sometimes it might be good to have somebody who kind of maybe even rubs you the wrong way, but it rubs you in a way that gets you to be more, to show more of what you can do. So find the people, find the compliments, find the people that make you do better, and keep working on it. And always, I would say, don't stress on one project forever because it'll never be perfect. My advice is that there's a point where you got to just walk away from it and say, that's it, that's the end, and then that's in the can, and go on to your next.
Okay.
That would be one of my advice. Yeah.
That's a very good advice. Thank
No,
you for
yeah.
that.
Just to go back a little bit on ma'am, I think one of the rules is that you need to have at least one of the key positions as someone with Asian background. So this is a very active way of bringing the representation not only in front of the camera but also behind the camera. So how has that worked in Vancouver? I'm asking that because uh, this has always been something very specific in my work. When I write something, I try
Yeah.
to always bring someone from a Latin background and like a Latin name in the character, especially because I'm from a very specific area in Brazil that we have a very specific accent that people usually make fun of. So this has always been something very present. So how has that been in the community here in Vancouver?
Yeah, it's very important. It's part of the whole, it's the purpose of what VAF is all about, representation. If we're not controlling the stories, if we're not part of that key creative team, then we're giving up our power to somebody else to tell our stories. And what I say to anybody who works in the film industry, if you are of a certain community, I think you have a responsibility to bring others along, to open the doors for them. You don't have to do the work for them, but you've got to open the door because somebody opened the door for you. And you've got to open the door for somebody else. And whether that's, just giving them a chance, putting them on the team, saying, hey, wouldn't it be great to have somebody that, is a little bit diverse? And because that's what creativity does. It's more diverse it is, and more creative you're going to be. If everybody's all the same and saying the same things, you're going to have a very boring show or a boring program. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So I think we all have to take a responsibility, and it may not be every time, because we can't have like somebody from Brazil, somebody from China, we have to be conscious of it. And the better part of what we do, we should always be opening the door for somebody else.
Yeah. Because you mentioned this before, that we are not consuming what our community is doing. And I think that's kind of one of our responsibilities, to start doing and start consuming that kind of content.
We have not really supported our own artists, and we need to do that. And I would say that that's a first step. So I do say that some of the barriers are coming from outside, from industry, outside of our community, and some of the barriers are coming from within our own community. And I don't just blame one side. We all have to work on it together.
Is it? Do you think it's a cultural thing to not consume this North American Asian content, or is it some sort of influence, like imperialist influence, that it stays like in the back of your mind and kind of prevents you from consuming?
Well, I'm doing a documentary actually right now on where are all the Asian rock stars in North America. And I look at that, and there's a little bit of internalized racism too, that an Asian rock star that's trying to compete with North American rock stars aren't good enough, or what they're producing isn't good enough, and that we don't consume them, we don't support them. But they all started somewhere. And if we all start, supporting them early on the career, they're going to get better. They're going to get more well known, and you're going to be an early adopter, and people are going to say, wow, you recognize that talent before everybody else did. Yeah. And isn't that great? So I would say that there's a bit of internalized racism. There's a bit of, they like the foreignness of Asian stars and Asian music. So that appeals to them because other people have endorsed it. So like BTS, other people have endorsed it, and therefore,
they go for like a higher position because of that, right?
Yeah. They don't allow the Asian Canadian artists that the infancy, the growing, the learning part of it. They just want them to be competing at the highest level. Well, we should be given the same opportunity to learn and grow and get better at our craft. And that's what BAF is all about, giving them the opportunity to get better. And I always tell people the story is that Justin Lin was our very first filmmaker. that we had at our very first VAF festival, and he's gone on to direct Fast and Furious and Star Trek, and
amazing things.
And he really he really supports the Asian film festivals, but he's also been able to break through the mainstream, and we're just hoping there'll be more of them as time goes on.
How can we start to support in being able to sit down and watch the full production and watch the full movie without judging about the production value and focusing more on the story?
Well, I would say that there's a group of audience, all they care about is production and the big tentpole kind of films. So, starting out as an independent filmmaker, you don't have that production budget. So you're never going to be able to compete with that. And if an audience member, that's what they want, which there are groups of people that we will not always appeal to, right? Just like some people like horror and some people don't. So you can't be all things, but what we talk about is story. If you don't have a good story, it doesn't matter how great the production is. There's lots of big films would have great CGI and lots of action, but if it's not anchored to a good story, they actually don't do well. So
there's a lot of those.
Yes, there's a lot of those. And if an audience member, that's all they care about, then you'll never get those people. But what we want, where film and art is when it touches you inside, right? Where it gets to you and you can see the story and you're like, either it gets you emotionally or it makes you think. So we always talk about, you're going to laugh, you're going to cry, but you're going to think, right? And that's what a good story is. And when I talk about the music and talk to it's a good song is a good song. Doesn't matter how much production beats and all synthesizers are on there. If the most basic part of it is a great song and melody and hook, the same thing with the story. A good story has great characters. It has, act 4. It has a journey that people can relate to. You don't need to fill it in. It just has to be told well. So it has to be told in a way that people can get it too. And so it's not always the best setting or production, but so those are the things I would say is really work on the character development, the story arc. What is the message? What are you trying to say? And if you build from that, then, and then that's one thing. So getting something good. The other one is distribution, getting eyeballs on it. That's a whole nother project. That's a whole nother struggle. So I would say that's where a different team, if that's not your strong point, find a team member that is a strong point. So and if you are really good at plot lines, but not great at character, then find somebody who's a great character writer and get them to help you develop the character. If somebody, when I was doing script writing, it's the subtext. Maybe you're saying this, but it's too obvious. Maybe you need somebody who's really good with subtext to write things and scenes. So that's what I'm saying is that you don't have to do it all, but you have to recognize where you're strong and where you're weak. So that would be a learning process.
Okay.
Especially to show support, like we need to create this critical eye within us to watch as something like maybe coming from a Latin background or an Asian background. Be like, okay, I don't like this, but why? Is it because the story is bad or because the technical aspect is bad? And if the technical aspect is bad, why is it bad? Is it because they didn't have enough opportunities? Is it this their first endeavors in the film industry? What is going on? Because you can just say like, oh, this is bad, so I'm not gonna support Asian film or Latin films because it's bad. No, why is it bad? Why do you don't like it? Like, keep always this critical eye to make sure that you're watching and giving good feedback, right?
Yeah, I would say to be a filmmaker, the best thing to do is, like, I found for me being on the programming team, watching a lot of films from like really good ones to really bad ones. And watching a lot of bad ones actually helps you because you can pinpoint where it's obvious where they went wrong or where the story went off or where they should have done. So watching bad films actually helps. And then as you watch more, you can say, oh, that's why that one's so much better because of this. They did this. And until you see some really bad ones, you're not just that discerning. Your critical eye isn't that developed. So you might know, oh, it's not that great, but you don't know why. And as you watch more and you see the subtle differences between the different films, because one might be slightly better than another, but why is that? And you can actually start pinpointing why it is. It's like anything, right? You got to start with baby steps. Maybe once in a while you're going to have something out of the park from somebody who's never done anything. That is off, and that's what people dream about. But a lot of people talk about the overnight success took 20 years, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And they don't see all the hard work and everything that it took before that one breakout film.
Yeah.
So I think, somebody said something to me that people just want to become famous and they don't want to work on their art. And I think there's some truth to that nowadays with this immediate, we live in a world of consumerism where everything's immediate and you have to be a star and have to have that breakout film by the time you're 25. There's a lot of pressure. You're not going to you don't have the life experiences maybe to tell a really strong story. Or you do have a strong story, but you don't have the voice yet. So I would say it just takes it takes work.
Yeah.
And I wanted to go back a little bit about something that you said before about this internalized racism. And how can you know if you are guilty of that and having that, and what can we do about it?
Well, internalized racism, I'm not an expert on it, and having struggled too, because I read somewhere, I was talking to somebody who talked about code switching, which means that because we live in this world that is predominantly white, that for survival and getting ahead, we've learned how to maneuver within this sort of world. And that sometimes we've switched the code so much that we've also internalized it to be and not realizing it. But I think you always have to be questioning yourself. It's something you have to work at. It's something that you have to say, well, what does that mean as a racialized person? How does that feel? And and I think deep inside that doesn't quite sit well. Why is that? And a lot of times it's because you're not fully participant in a white dominant culture because of the way you look. And so how is that causing some internal conflict or just something that's not, I think a lot of us know it on a very subconscious level and trying to bring it up to a conscious level, because that's only the time you can actually work on it. And it's just always questioning. I think you just need to always question yourself and work towards questioning everything.
Okay, that's a good advice. And I'm asking this because I saw that you now have this new initiative, the Eliminate Hate initiative.
Yes.
So I don't know if you can tell us a little bit about that.
Right. So back when the coronavirus was first, happening, and there was a lot of anti-Asian racism, and we reached out to some community groups, and there wasn't really anything that was happening. So we felt that we had to take a leadership role in fighting anti-Asian racism. We saw that we had a group of people that really believed in advocacy, and representation is not that far. It's actually probably the most effective way to combat racism. And we were sort of we've always positioned ourselves that to be seen and heard is a way to break down walls and break down prejudices. And so we were just pivoting a lot, and we launched the Eliminate Hate campaign so that people who were victims of racist attacks could report someplace that they felt safe, that wasn't attached to the police. And then we also wanted celebrities and writers and community groups to make their own public service announcements to let people know that hate is not okay, and also to let the victims know that they're not alone, that there's support behind them, and we're not just going to let this happen to our community. So we launched it. It was a great, we got great support from different people in the community. We are going to do a workshop on model minority myth that's going to happen in the fall.
Nice.
To talk about some of those things and internalized racism, the mental health piece, and also how we can be in solidarity with other racialized groups, BIPOC groups, and not to be performative, but to be really good allies. And and what does that mean, and how does that look, and what can we do to help, and work together, because we don't want to be pitted against each other. We want to be, we want to build this table where everyone has a seat at it.
Yeah, it's not a competition.
It's not a competition. Yeah. There's enough resources to go around.
And it's very interesting that during this pandemic, we've been seeing this, not rebirth, but like a rise in this, like Eliminate Hate movement, BIPOC movement. It's really affirming and really positive to think that maybe post-pandemic things are going to definitely be different. Because it's like you said, it's a public service. Like it's a basic thing.
What we have to do is we cannot sit back and let it revert back to what's easy.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's something that we have to be very cognizant of, because it's easy to go back to what we all know. It really is easy. I've been struggling with with VAF for 25 years. I mean, we have no paid staff. We still struggle, and it'd be easy to pack it in, but maybe I'm just too stubborn. I don't know. But I think if we all just work a little towards it and just keep the momentum going, then I can see, the world as it is not the way we want it. How do we want it, and what does it take to get us all there? That is a continual struggle.
Yeah.
But film, television leads the way. I mean, think of all the sci-fi shows that had, cell phones or talking on your wrist and things like that. They dreamt it before it became a reality. Film and television, we can dream the world, the kind of world we want, and let the engineers and everybody else
keep up with with what we thought of.
We dream it and think of it, let the engineers and everybody else build them.
No, but absolutely, I really resonate with what you just said, because we don't talk about it. Like, yes, we talk about how powerful film and storytelling is and the creative aspect, but we usually don't say, like, actually life imitates art and films. Like, we think of like a tablet, and then maybe 10 years later there's a tablet.
That's why I wanted to pitch, all these scientific organizations. They should have an artist
in-house.
Like, dream up something and then go make it happen. That's what happened with Steve Jobs. He wasn't an engineer. He wasn't the guy who put it together, but he dreamt it and sent people off to make it happen. Ford with the car. He came up with the ideas and he kept pushing them to make it better. We need a lot more dreamers. We need a lot more storytellers, because that's going to push us for better things.
We have the final question, because the name of the podcast is FilmStruggles. This is something that we ask everyone, all the guests that we have so far in the podcast. We want to know, Barbara, which one is your biggest struggle in the film industry?
That's a tough one. I've had lots of struggles. My biggest film struggle was accepting that my work is not going to be perfect. I think that's I come from a community that is this whole model minority myth that we have to be perfect, that everything we do has to be great, and struggling with that is, like my first film, I'm not that proud of. It's, there's a lot of problems with it. I'm doing this documentary about my songs. I've been writing songs, and I'm not very happy with the way my vocals are. So I think for me is just my own self-critic.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be my biggest struggle.
That's specifically my biggest struggle as well.
Yeah. So thank you very much, Barbara.
Thank you.
Good luck with all your projects.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
very much.
Have a good
Bye.
one. Bye.
Bye.
Okay, bye.
If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to give us a review and share this with someone you think might need it.
Also, share with us your favorite quote.
You can find more information about the podcast and our guests on the website filmstruggles.com.
Remember to follow us at FilmStruggles on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook.
Thank you for listening
See you next week with a new guest.
and a brand new struggle.
Film Struggles is hosted, produced, and edited by Claudia Hernandez Barragan and Gabriel Sousa Nunes.
Executive producer is Harrison Carranza and sound design by Sebastian Sagastumi.